Now, in the Legend of Zelda series, there are a lot of things that belong in every game, and one of those are the classic dungeons. They were seen from the very beginning and played a huge role in all of them. However, were we ever disappointed by them? Which ones are the worst and most annoying? Well, let's find out. Number 8. Now, in the series, there are a couple of games where Link never gets a horse, or even spends a lot of time running around on land, like the Wind Waker. And here we see the Forsaken Fortress, an ominous island that most people tend to avoid. The stone fortress is well guarded with cannons, searchlights, and hordes of mini-blins, macablins, and moblins who patrol the area and attack any would-be invaders. Now, originally you have to go there to save your sister. The first time the whole plan kind of fails, you lose your weapon and have to sneak around. This can be really fun. It's one of the only big stealth sections in the entire game. However, it can also be extremely frustrating. The place is quite big, once you're spotted you end up in the jail and have to backtrack a bit, some enemies don't arrest you but straight up attack, and finding out what you have to do can be complicated. While I certainly like the concept of the whole place, it's not as streamlined as it should be. Now, don't get me wrong, it shouldn't be linear. The thing that I want is for it all to make a bit more sense and have a more logical layout at times. One way they could have solved this is by not making it the very first one. It's quite a jump after all. You go from Outset Island where nothing happens to a military-grade fortress that you have to infiltrate. So, cool concept, but not as good as it could be. The second time you go there is a lot more fun in my opinion, so especially the first time could be improved. Number 7. Although Breath of the Wild is an open-world Zelda, there are still a ton of mini and full-size dungeons like the Divine Beasts and Shrines. However, there's one of them that I dislike the most. All of them are quite similar, but one stands out to me: Varuta. Link has to reclaim it from evil, and in order to do this, 3 things need to be done: get inside, clear the puzzles, and defeat the boss. Now, the part of getting in it is really cool because you must team up with Sidon to disable the beast. Link must disable the switches on Ruta's sides by shooting them with shock arrows. Each time he disables a switch, Ruta sends an increasingly savage volley of ice blocks and spheres that Link must shatter with the Cryonis rune. So this part is actually one of the highlights of the whole place. But as soon as you go inside, it all goes downhill. There you must solve all kinds of mini puzzles using either your own skills or the trunk of the giant beast that sprays water. Now, in my opinion, the puzzles were a bit underwhelming, and using the trunk wasn't that fun or special at all, so it's kind of disappointing compared to the rest. For example, the one that we see in Gerudo Desert has a rotating body with quite complex puzzles, but it also has something else: a fun boss fight. Waterblight Ganon is, in my opinion, a terrible excuse of a boss. First time I tried to beat it, I completely prepared, but it was all useless in the end because he was way too easy to defeat. All its attacks are telegraphed in its movement about 10 seconds before anything even happens, and as soon as you hit its eye with an arrow, it's down. So really, this entire dungeon is a bit of a disappointment compared to the rest. Number 6. Fortresses aren't the only thing that's seen in the Wind Waker, because there are also some ancient temples, and one of these is quite annoying: the Earth Temple. And this isn't because of the temple itself, but actually the person that you need to drag along with you, Medley. This is actually the case for both the Wind and Earth Temple. You have to drag a companion along with you, and they are kind of useless. While the objectives in the temples themselves are actually quite fun, the fact that those two will bother you the whole time just ruins it. The pacing of the game is just off because of it. The whole time there are interruptions, or you'll have to wait for something. And then of course they mess up from time to time and you'll have to redo some things here and there, which also gets on your nerves. So the whole package just doesn't work in my opinion. And I even left out one thing that makes it a complete nightmare. If you want to control them, you have to play a song on the Wind Waker. Again, and again, and again. It just ruins the dungeon for me. I don't want some stupid brick attached to my leg that I have to drag along. So while the mechanics, puzzles and fights seen in these dungeons are well designed and fun, this feature they added isn't. Number 5. Now, one of my favorite Zelda games is Twilight Princess, and I actually like the villain in this game a lot. However, there's one problem. The dungeon set in his world is a bit underwhelming. You need to invade his palace, and to do so, you need to free corrupted Twilight and bless the Master Sword with the power of the souls. After that, you can enter and work your way through it. However, in my opinion, the whole package is a bit mediocre. Throughout the entire game, you get to see and hear why Zant is so evil, and how he destroyed thousands of lives, but in the end, the climax comes down to this. And there isn't a whole lot to see in this dungeon. Only some generic mechanics, puzzles that look and feel the same, and one good fight at the end when you take on Zant. Personally, I expected more from this whole encounter. He even had the time to prepare because you were busy getting all the mirror pieces after all. So I expected some epic showdown and struggled to even get to him, but in the end, this wasn't really the case. It would have been cool to see him summon all kinds of forces and power to get rid of you, but he just kind of waits in his throne room. So overall, the whole experience is a bit simple and linear for how big the build-up was towards this moment. A bit of a shame. Number 4. Before we jump in, you have to help me with something. I can see you're not subscribed, so you will miss content. So for your own safety, be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon, then you won't miss any Nintendo content, and your happiness level will remain stable. So now that that's out of the way, we can continue. While Twilight Princess is certainly a fun and solid game, there's one I like a lot more, the infamous Majora's Mask. And here we got to see a form of the water temple that's terrible as well, the Great Bay Temple. Now, getting there isn't a bad quest on its own, just a fetch quest that takes you to different locations where you have to retrieve the eggs somehow. While it can take a while, it certainly isn't the worst thing in the world. The part where it turns into a nightmare happens once you're inside the temple. To progress within it, Link needs to open numerous water valves that are part of an extremely complex network of pipes. Doing so enables the functionality of water-based elevators that help Link reach new places. Eventually, he has to invert the direction of the water's continuous flow so that the flux can take him to new parts of the temple. This is the worst thing in the entire game. This part drives me insane every time, and it's everything except fun. Finding the pipes is annoying, using the Zora form can be a bit weird and buggy, and the boss is also extremely irritating. Now, fixing the Zora form by making the controls better would solve part of the problem, but it's still confusing and tedious. While the whole idea is cool, Nintendo is just too ambitious, so this turned into a mess. Number 3. Now, can you imagine a dungeon where the design and objectives are terrible, but there's also an annoying companion? No? Well, that's strange, because Ocarina of Time has one just like that. Inside Jabu Jabu's belly, the dungeon that takes place inside a fish, where you have to drag around a spoiled princess that only nags, and the dungeon itself is quite boring. There are 2 things that you basically do in this place: running around looking for things, or dealing with Ruto, who's a terrible person. So the dungeon itself already doesn't offer that much. What about the bosses? Are they any good then? Well, not really. Both the mini-boss and main boss are quite annoying and yet again very tedious. Everything just takes too long, and there isn't enough to do or see. So really, there aren't any redeeming qualities to this one. I hate it with a passion, and will probably do so my whole life. No matter what Nintendo would change, it will remain annoying and very tiring. The whole Ruto element should be removed, and inside the dungeon more should be added. However, they will probably never do this in a remake, sadly enough. Number 2. Throughout the years, we have seen Hyrule change a lot, however, one thing that always remained is the legendary Hyrule Castle. And in Breath of the Wild, it functions as the final dungeon, which is a really cool thing, but it just lacks some things. When going there, you have some fighting segments, small puzzles, and even mini-bosses in the form of Lionels. However, for the final showdown, Calamity Ganon's evil lair for over 100 years, I expected a bit more than just this. There isn't enough to do and no structure in it. You can enter from almost any point and quite easily sneak your way to Ganon without doing anything. I know the game is built with the open world aspect in mind, but I expected this last trial to be a bit more linear and challenging. Especially if you already did all the other Divine Beasts, this place becomes quite easy to deal with, because the most challenging obstacles can be skipped. Even the final fight is underwhelming. The first round is great, but his second form is a huge letdown. Overall, Calamity Ganon could have been so much better. But in the end, he just became a combination of all the blights with some extra stuff added. Yet again, a letdown for the amount of build-up this whole section got. Number 1. Now for our number 1, we will be looking at everyone's worst nightmare, the Water Temple from Ocarina of Time. The ancient temple lies deep under the vast Lake Hylia, guarded by the Zoras, and it's considered a sacred temple that is used to worship the water spirits. However, to many, it's also known as the world's biggest nightmare. And there are actually a couple of reasons why. First up, the iron boots. You use these a lot to get around, and to equip them you need to go into your menu every time. This drove some people completely insane, which is quite logical, because you had to use this a lot to get from low to high, or the other way around. This also kills your speed, making the pacing of the whole temple as random as it could be. But luckily enough, some of this was solved in the 3DS remake. Besides that, the other problems like the hectic and confusing dungeon layouts, bad final boss, and multiple water levels also drive you nuts. So really, this is yet again a good example of Nintendo trying really hard, but yet again ending up with something too complex. I did a whole video about this before, so I will put a link in the upper right corner, so be sure to check it out. And now you finally know what I hate the most in this world. Well, when it comes to Zelda dungeons at least. Thanks for watching, you lovely, I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to check out that water temple video I mentioned 10 seconds ago, it's in the upper right corner and probably on the screen right now. And besides that, be sure to subscribe and click the bell, then you won't miss anything. Believe me, it's worth it.